The morning sunlight streamed through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the concrete floor of the enclosure. Amara sat motionless in the farthest corner, her massive frame curled inward like a question mark no one could answer. Her dark eyes, once bright with intelligence and curiosity, stared unseeing at the ground. The zookeepers watched her from a distance, their whispered observations floating through the air like autumn leaves. Day 31. Still no change. She hasn't touched her breakfast again. Should we call Dr. Levine? Dana Matthews pressed her lips together as she scribbled notes on her clipboard. As head primatologist at Jefferson Park Zoo, she had witnessed animals experiencing grief before, mothers who carried their dead infants for days, mates who called out for missing partners. But Amara's descent into silence was something different, something deeper. "I'm going to try one more approach before we consider medication," Dana told her team, though her voice lacked conviction. 3 months had passed since the night Amara's infant had stopped breathing. 3 months of watching one of their most engaging western lowland gorillas slowly disappear into herself. The zoo had started their day as usual. Visitors streamed through the gates. Children squealed with delight at the sight of exotic animals, and parents pushed strollers packed with snacks and extra clothes. The air smelled of popcorn and sunscreen. It was a perfect June day, the kind where memories are made, except in the gorilla habitat, where time had stopped on a cold March night. "We've got a school group coming through in an hour," Mark, one of the junior keepers, said. "Should we put up the sign again?" The sign was a small laminated notice they'd begun placing near the viewing area. "Amara is currently resting. Please respect her privacy." It was easier than answering endless questions about why the gorilla wouldn't move or respond to tapping on the glass. Dana nodded, her eyes never leaving Amara's still form. "Yes, but let's try something first." She entered the keeper area adjacent to the enclosure, where they could safely interact with the gorillas through a mesh barrier. Dana had been working with these animals for 15 years, and Amara had always been special, intelligent, responsive, almost contemplative in her interactions. She'd come to the zoo as a juvenile and had bonded strongly with Dana from the beginning. "Hey, girl," Dana said softly, approaching the mesh. She held out an apple. "Amara's favorite treat. I brought you something." The gorilla didn't stir. Her breathing was the only indication she was alive at all. Behind Dana, Dr. Reeves, the zoo's veterinarian, shook his head. "We need to consider intervention, Dana. She's lost weight. Her coat's losing luster. I know you want to give her time, but—" "One more day," Dana interrupted. "Please." Dr. Reeves sighed, but nodded. Dana had earned her reputation as one of the best in her field, and her connection with Amara had always bordered on the mystical. If anyone could reach the grieving mother, it would be her. The school group arrived precisely at 10 a.m., a chaotic swarm of blue uniforms and excited voices. Their teacher, a tall woman with a no-nonsense expression, attempted to corral them into an orderly line. "Remember what we discussed on the bus?" she called over the chatter. "We're guests in the animal's home. Use your indoor voices, and no tapping on the glass." Most of the children bunched together at the viewing area, disappointed to find the gorilla exhibit's star attraction huddled in the shadows. "She's not doing anything," a girl with pigtails complained. "Is she sick?" asked another child. "Maybe she's sleeping," suggested a boy with a baseball cap. The teacher began explaining about animal behaviors and habitats, but the children's attention was already drifting toward the promise of more active exhibits. All except one. A small boy with dark curls and serious eyes remained at the glass, separated from his classmates. He wore the same blue uniform, but something about him seemed older, more deliberate in his movements. While the others pressed forward to the next exhibit, he stayed behind, watching Amara with unwavering attention. Dana noticed him from her observation point. "That one's different," she murmured to Mark. The boy, his name tag read Milo, approached the glass slowly, as if walking into a sacred space. There was no excited bouncing, no calling out to friends. He simply stood there, his small frame dwarfed by the massive viewing window, and then with gentle purpose pressed his hand against the cool surface. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. Amara remained still, locked in her private world of grief. Dana was about to look away when she caught it. The slightest twitch of the gorilla's fingers, a minute tilt of her massive head. "Mark," Dana whispered urgently. "Look." Amara's eyes, which had been fixed on nothing for weeks, shifted. Slowly, deliberately, her gaze traveled across the enclosure until it found the boy. The connection was electric. Dana could feel it from where she stood, a tangible current running between them. "She's looking at him," Mark breathed, reaching for his radio. "She's actually looking at him." The gorilla's nostrils flared slightly, testing the air, though she couldn't possibly smell the child through the glass barrier. Then, with movements that seemed to require monumental effort, Amara uncurled her powerful frame and rose to her feet. "Holy shit," whispered Mark, then quickly apologized for his language. Dana couldn't speak. After weeks of coaxing, pleading, and professional intervention, Amara was moving. Not just shifting position, but purposefully crossing the enclosure toward the glass, toward the boy who stood perfectly still, hand outstretched. By now, a few visitors had noticed the gorilla's movement and stopped to watch. The teacher called for Milo to rejoin the group, but her voice seemed to reach neither the boy nor the gorilla, both locked in their silent communication. Amara stopped directly in front of the glass, her massive form towering over the child. A breath fogged the surface between them. Then, with surprising gentleness, she raised her hand, the same hand that had cradled her infant, the same hand that had refused food for weeks, and pressed it against the glass, palm to palm with the boy's smaller one. The moment crystallized, suspended in time. No one spoke. No cameras flashed. It felt almost sacred, this connection between a grieving gorilla and a solemn child. Dana's radio crackled to life. "Dana, what's happening?" "The cameras show Amara at the glass." She lifted the radio with trembling fingers. "Amara just approached a visitor. First interaction in 31 days. As word spread, more staff members appeared at the observation points, watching in disbelief as Amara maintained her position, hand pressed against the glass, eyes fixed on Milo. Something about the boy's face nagged at Dana's memory. There was a familiarity there, something she couldn't quite place but felt important. She stepped closer, studying him. The teacher finally approached, placing a hand on Milo's shoulder. "Milo, sweetheart, we need to rejoin our group." The boy didn't move, and neither did Amara. It was as if they existed in a bubble separate from the world around them, sharing something no one else could understand. Then Amara did something that sent a chill down Dana's spine. Her free hand rose slowly and began to move in a pattern, fingers curling, uncurling, gesturing. To most observers, it might have looked random, but Dana recognized it immediately. "She's signing," Dana whispered, stepping closer to the glass. "Those are the signs from her early training." Before anyone could respond, Amara's hand settled into a familiar gesture, one that Dana herself had taught the gorilla years ago during a specialized cognitive program. It was the sign for remember. Children rarely stand still. They fidget, bounce, and flutter like butterflies, unable to choose a flower. But Milo Matthews was different. As the school group's excited voices faded down the corridor, he remained motionless, his hand pressed against the glass, as if completing an electrical circuit with the massive gorilla on the other side. "Milo," his teacher called again, her voice tinged with growing concern. "We need to stay with our group." The boy didn't seem to hear her. His dark eyes remained locked with Amara's, an understanding passing between them that no one else could decipher. Dana stepped forward, her scientist's mind racing to catalogue every detail of this unexpected interaction. "It's okay," she told the teacher. "I'll make sure he catches up with you. This is significant." The teacher hesitated, then nodded. "The reptile house is our next stop. Please bring him there when this is finished." When the teacher left, Dana knelt beside the boy, careful not to disturb whatever delicate thread connected him to Amara. "Hello, Milo," she said softly. "I'm Dana. I take care of Amara. Milo finally broke his gaze from the gorilla to glance briefly at Dana. "She's sad," he said simply. The directness of his observation startled her. Most children asked if the animals were sleeping or why they weren't doing tricks. They didn't immediately recognize emotional states. "Yes," Dana agreed. "She lost her baby a few months ago. She's been very sad since then." Milo nodded, as if this confirmed something he already knew. "My mom gets sad too. Sometimes she sits and doesn't move, just like her." He gestured toward Amara, who was still watching them intently. Something in the way he spoke, the matter-of-fact acceptance of grief as a normal part of life, made Dana study him more closely. He couldn't be more than 7 or 8, with unruly dark curls and eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than his years warranted. "Does your mom know you're here at the zoo today?" Dana asked, wondering if there was more to this story. "She signed the permission slip," Milo replied, his hands still pressed against the glass. "But she didn't come. She never comes to the zoo anymore." Before Dana could probe further, Amara shifted her position. The gorilla settled onto the floor, sitting directly across from Milo, her massive body just inches from the glass. Then, to Dana's astonishment, Amara began tapping her finger against the barrier. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Milo tilted his head, listening. Without hesitation, he responded with the same pattern. Tap, tap, top, pause, tap, tap. Dana's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't random. It was a rhythm, a communication, a game. But how could the boy know to respond unless— "Milo," she asked carefully, "have you ever visited Amma before?" The boy shrugged. "I don't think so. Not that I remember." Meanwhile, Mark had joined them, his radio still crackling with updates from other staff members who were monitoring the situation remotely. "Dana," he whispered, "Dr. Reeves wants to know if we should bring in the video equipment." Dana nodded. "Tell him yes, but keep it unobtrusive. I don't want to disrupt whatever's happening here." As Mark stepped away to relay the message, Dana noticed something else. Amara had begun gathering items from her enclosure. A scrap of burlap from an enrichment toy, some fresh leaves, a piece of rope. With deliberate care, the gorilla arranged these items in a small pile near the glass, directly across from where Milo sat. "She's nesting," Dana murmured, recognizing the behavior. Gorillas often created day nests for resting, but this wasn't typical nesting behavior. Amara was building it for display, as if she were preparing a space. Milo watched with quiet fascination. "She's making a bed," he said, "like my mom does when I'm sick." More visitors had gathered now, drawn by the unusual sight of the normally reclusive gorilla's activity. Phones emerged to capture the moment, but Dana quickly gestured to her staff to enforce the no-flash photography rule. The last thing they needed was to startle Amara back into her withdrawn state. From across the habitat, 2 other gorillas watched with interest. Keba, the silverback male, observed from his favorite perch on a rock formation, while Zuri, a younger female, approached cautiously. Curious about Amara's sudden change in behavior, "Milo," Dana began carefully, "can I ask you something? Does your mom ever talk about coming to this zoo before? Maybe when you were much younger?" The boy's brow furrowed in concentration. "Sometimes she talks about before the bad thing happened. She says we used to do lots of things then." He turned his serious eyes to Dana. "But I don't remember the before time very well." "The before time," Dana repeated softly. Something was crystallizing in her mind, fragments of memory fitting together like puzzle pieces. 5 years ago, the zoo had run a special program, a research initiative studying emotional bonding between pregnant gorillas and human participants. It had been small, selective, focusing on regular visitors who could commit to weekly sessions. And Amara had been one of the gorillas in that program. Pregnant with her first infant, Dana excused herself briefly, asking Mark to stay with Milo. She hurried to a staff-only door, pulled out her phone, and quickly scrolled through her older photos. There, a picture from the program's final session. A group of participants gathered by the gorilla habitat, and in the front row, a woman holding a toddler with dark, curly hair. Dana zoomed in, her heart racing. The toddler couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years old, but those serious eyes were unmistakable. It was Milo. When she returned to the viewing area, she found Milo seated cross-legged on the floor, completely at ease. Amara mirrored his position on the other side of the glass, her nest building temporarily abandoned. "Milo," Dana said, keeping her voice casual. "What's your mum's name?" "Helen," he replied without looking away from Amara. "Helen Matthews." The name hit Dana like a physical force. Helen Matthews. Of course, she had been one of their most dedicated participants in the bonding program, a young mother with a toddler who had shown remarkable empathy for the pregnant gorilla. Helen and little Milo had visited weekly for months. Right up until Dana couldn't remember why they'd stopped coming. The program had eventually ended after Amara's first baby was born healthy, but died unexpectedly a few months later. The gorilla had recovered from that loss, going on to socialize normally and eventually conceive again. But this second loss, it had broken something in her that all Dana's expertise couldn't fix. Until now. "Milo, do you like animals?" Dana asked, sitting beside him. The boy nodded. "I have a turtle named Rocket, and I feed the birds in the park." "Would you like to know something special about Amara?" When Milo nodded again, Dana continued. "I think she remembers you from a long time ago, when you were very little, and she was going to have her first baby." Milo's eyes widened slightly. "Really? But I don't remember her." "You were only about 2 years old," Dana explained. "Your mom used to bring you here to visit Amara every week. You would sit right here, just like this, and watch her. You was pregnant then, excited about her baby, just like your mom was excited about you." As if understanding their conversation, Amara let out a soft rumble, not quite a vocalization, but a gentle sound from deep in her chest. She extended one long finger toward the glass, directly at Milo. "She wants you to do the taps again," Dana suggested. Milo immediately placed his fingertips against the glass and repeated the pattern. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. Amara responded in kind, and this time added a new sequence: 2 taps, pause, 3 taps. Without hesitation, Milo echoed it back. "It's like a secret code," he whispered, a smile breaking across his face for the first time. Dana felt a lump form in her throat. What they were witnessing wasn't just unusual animal behavior, it was memory, recognition across the years, connection transcending species. "Dana," Mark called quietly from nearby. "The principal from Milo's school is on the phone. They're concerned about him missing the rest of the tour." Reality intruded on the moment. Of course, the school would be worried about accountability for a missing student. Dana checked her watch. Nearly 45 minutes had passed since the class had moved on. "Milo," she said gently, "we need to get you back to your class now. But if it's okay with your mom, maybe you could come visit Amara again." The boy's face fell. "Does she have to be sad when I'm not here?" Dana didn't have the heart to tell him that Amara would likely retreat back into her depression once he left. "We'll take good care of her," she promised instead. As Milo reluctantly rose to his feet, Amara pressed both hands against the glass, her dark eyes following his movement. She made a soft hooting sound, the first real vocalization Dana had heard from her in weeks. "I think she's saying goodbye," Dana translated, though the sound carried a desperation that squeezed her heart. Milo placed his hand against the glass one last time. "Bye, Amara. I'll come back." As Dana led him away toward the reptile house, she could feel Amara watching them leave. A plan was already forming in her mind. She needed to contact Helen Matthews, to explain what had happened today, to understand why they'd stopped coming 5 years ago, and perhaps, just perhaps, to bring Milo back to the gorilla who had never forgotten him. Behind them, Amara remained at the glass long after they disappeared from view, her nest of collected items awaiting a return that wasn't guaranteed. For the first time in 31 days, she picked up a piece of fruit from her morning meal and took a small bite, the first step back toward living. Dana Matthews sat alone in her office, the evening sun casting long shadows across stacks of research papers and behavioral charts. On her computer screen, an old photograph glowed. A group of participants from the zoo's bonding program 5 years ago. She zoomed in on a woman holding a toddler, both gazing at a pregnant Amara through the glass. Helen and Milo Matthews. Her fingers drummed nervously on her desk as she waited for her call to be answered. After returning Milo to his school group, Dana had spent hours digging through archives, pulling old consent forms, and searching participant records until she found a contact number for Helen Matthews. "Hello?" A woman's voice finally answered, cautious and slightly tired. Dana straightened. "Ms. Matthews, this is Dana Levine from Jefferson Park Zoo. I'm calling about your son, Milo." A sharp intake of breath came through the phone. "Is he all right? Did something happen during the field trip?" "He's fine," Dana assured her quickly. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Something remarkable happened today between Milo and one of our gorillas." Silence stretched across the line before Helen spoke again. "Amara," she said softly, not a question, but a recognition. "Yes," Dana confirmed. Surprised, "You remember her name?" "Of course I do." Helen's voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "How could I forget?" Dana leaned forward, pressing the phone closer to her ear. "Ms. Matthews, Helen, I was hoping we could meet. There's something important I'd like to discuss about Milo's interaction with Amara today." Another pause, longer this time. Dana could hear the faint sounds of a television in the background. Dishes being placed in a sink. "I don't think that's a good idea," Helen finally said. "Please," Dana pressed. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Amara has been in a severe depression since losing her infant 3 months ago. Today was the first time she's shown any interest in anything or anyone. Something about Milo reached her when nothing else could." The silence that followed felt weighted, as if Helen was physically carrying the decision. "Tomorrow after school," she finally said. "I'll bring Milo to your office at 4. After they disconnected, Dana turned back to her computer, opening the file containing Amara's records from the past 5 years. The gorilla had been one of their most successful cases of captive breeding, intelligent, maternal, well-adjusted. Until the night she wasn't. Dana rubbed her eyes. The familiar ache of that night returning. She had been called at 2 a.m. by the night keeper who had noticed Amara's distress. By the time Dana arrived, it was too late. The 3-month-old infant had stopped breathing for reasons they still didn't fully understand, despite the necropsy. What was different this time? Why had Amara's grief transformed into something so profound, so debilitating? And why, after weeks of unresponsiveness, had she recognized a child she hadn't seen in 5 years? Dana turned to another file. The records from the bonding program. It had been an experimental initiative, studying whether regular positive interactions between pregnant gorillas and human mothers with young children could benefit both species. The hypothesis had been that the shared experience of motherhood might create unique opportunities for cross-species empathy and cognitive development. The program had been small, carefully controlled, with just 10 human participants paired with 3 pregnant female gorillas over the course of 6 months. Dana scrolled through attendance records until she found Helen and Milo Matthews. Unlike the other participants who had attended sporadically, the Matthews had never missed a single weekly session. They had been assigned exclusively to Amara, spending every Tuesday afternoon seated at a special viewing area, where the glass had been modified to include a communication panel with simple buttons. Amara could press to receive treats or toys. Dana clicked through progress notes, finding entries about the developing relationship. Week 4. Mara shows clear recognition of toddler Mim, approaching glass immediately when he enters. Mother HM reports increased vocalization from Mim about go-go, his word for gorilla between visits. Week 7. First instance of mimicry observed. Mim tapped glass in distinct pattern, 3-2, which Amara repeated successfully, 6 buys with variation. Week 12. Amara brings nesting materials to glass when Mim present. displays nurturing behaviors, including food-sharing attempts, pressing fruit against glass, and self-grooming demonstrations. The final entry caught Dana's eye. Week 24, final session. HM. Extremely distressed. Requested removal from program citing personal emergency. Staff offered support services. Declined. Amara showed signs of distress at abrupt termination. Refused enrichment for 3 days following. Dana frowned. There was no further explanation. No follow-up notes. The program itself had concluded 2 months later, when all 3 gorillas gave birth. Her office door opened, and Mark stepped in, holding 2 coffee cups. He placed one on her desk and collapsed into the chair opposite. Security says Amara stayed at that glass for hours after the boy left, he said, taking a sip from his cup. She only moved when we dimmed the lights for evening. Dana nodded, turning her computer so Mark could see the old photograph. That's Milo. 5 years ago, and his mother, Helen. Mark leaned forward, squinting at the image. No way, the kid from the bonding program. But he was just a baby then. How could Amara possibly recognize him? I don't know, Dane admitted. But she did. And tomorrow they're coming back. The mother agreed. Mark seemed surprised. Dana hesitated. She didn't sound thrilled about it. Something happened back then. Something that made them stop coming suddenly. The records just say personal emergency. But she trailed off, staring at the photo again. But what? Mark prompted. Look at the photo closely, Dana said. See anyone else with them? Mark studied the image, then nodded slowly. A man, standing behind them with his hand on the woman's shoulder. Exactly. And he's not in any of the later photos. I think whatever happened, it involved him. The next afternoon, Dana paced her office nervously, checking her watch every few minutes. At precisely 4 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. Come in, she called. Helen Matthews entered first, her posture stiff with tension. She was thinner than in the photographs, with lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult years. But she was unmistakably the same woman. Behind her, Milo peered around curiously, his dark eyes widening as he took in the office with its walls of animal photographs and behavioral charts. Thank you for coming, Dana said, offering her hand. I'm Dana Levine. Helen shook it briefly, her grip cool and formal. Milo hasn't stopped talking about the gorilla since yesterday. He says you told him she remembers him from when he was little. I believe she does, Dana confirmed, gesturing for them to sit. That's partly why I wanted to meet with you. What happened yesterday was extraordinary. Is this her? Milo interrupted, pointing to a framed photograph on Dana's desk, showing Amara holding her first infant. Dana nodded. Yes, that's Amara with her first baby about 5 years ago. Milo studied the picture intently. Was that when I knew her? Yes, Helen answered before Dana could, her voice tight. That was during the time we used to visit. Dana observed the tension in Helen's shoulders, the way her fingers twisted in her lap. Miss Matthews, I don't want to pry into your personal life, but our records show you and Milo attended every session of our bonding program until suddenly stopping. Whatever happened, I think it may be relevant to understanding Amara's reaction to Milo yesterday. Helen's eyes darted to her son, then back to Dana. Milo, honey, would you mind waiting outside for a minute? There's a bench right there. I can see you through the window. Once the boy had reluctantly left, Helen's composure cracked slightly. My husband died, she said flatly. A car accident on our way home from the zoo. Our last session with Amara. Dana's breath caught. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. No one here did. We were already in the car when it happened. Another driver ran a red light, hit us on James's side. Helen's voice remained mechanical, as if reading from a police report. Milo was in the back seat. He doesn't remember much from that time. Thank God. And you never came back, Dana said softly. Helen shook her head. How could I? This place. It was the last happy moment we had as a family. James was so invested in that program. More than me, even. He was the one who'd read to Milo about gorillas every night, who'd taught him the tapping games to play with Amara. Her voice finally wavered. After he was gone, I could barely function, let alone bring Milo back here. Dana nodded, understanding flooding through her. And Milo doesn't remember any of this. He was only 2.5. He knows his father died in an accident. But the details, Helen sighed. Children that young don't form lasting memories the way adults do. At least, that's what all the grief counselors told me. But Amara remembered. Dana said quietly. Helen's eyes met hers, suddenly fierce. Are you saying that Gorilla remembers my son from 5 years ago? That's impossible. I thought so too. Until yesterday. Impossible, Helen repeated, but her voice had lost its certainty. Diana opened a folder on her desk and slid forward several printed photographs, stills captured from yesterday's video footage. They showed Amara and Milo, hands pressed together through the glass, the gorilla's intense gaze fixed on the boy. Great apes have extraordinary memories, Dana explained gently. They form complex emotional attachments, grieve their dead, and recognize faces even after years of separation. What's unusual here isn't that Amara remembers, it's the depth of her response after all this time. Helen studied the photos, her fingers tracing the outline of her son's profile. The tapping, she murmured. Yes, Dana nodded eagerly. The 3 taps, then 2. That was their game, wasn't it? Helen's eyes closed briefly, pain washing across her face. James taught him that. He called it their secret code. 3 taps for I'm here, 2 for with you. Milo was speech delayed as a toddler, so they used a lot of little games like that. She looked up sharply, but Milo doesn't remember that. How did he know to respond yesterday? I think some memories exist beyond conscious recall, Dana suggested, especially ones formed during emotionally significant experiences. Before Helen could respond, there was a tap at the window. Milo was watching them, pointing urgently toward the corridor that led to the gorilla habitat. Helen sighed. He wants to see her again. Would that be all right with you? Dana asked carefully. The staff has prepared a private viewing area, away from the public, just for the 3 of us. The hesitation in Helen's eyes was palpable. A war between protection and possibility. Finally, she nodded once. Just for a little while. When they reached the special observation area, a small room with a large window that looked directly into a quiet corner of Amara's enclosure, Milo pressed forward eagerly. Where is she? He asked, scanning the habitat. We'll need to call her, Dana explained, moving to an intercom system. Amara has access to both indoor and outdoor areas. She's probably with the other gorillas right now. She pressed a button, and a gentle chime sounded in the habitat. That lets her know someone's here to see her. They waited in silence. Milo's small hands pressed against the glass, Helen hanging back near the door, as if ready for a quick escape. 3 minutes passed, with no sign of the gorilla. Maybe she's sleeping, Milo suggested, but disappointment clouded his voice. Let's try once more, Dana said, pressing the chime button again. This time, they heard movement, the soft rustle of straw, the distinct sound of powerful limbs in motion. From the shadowy recesses of an artificial cave, Amara emerged. Her movements were cautious at first, almost hesitant, but when she caught sight of Milo at the window, something changed in her posture. She straightened, her movements becoming purposeful as she approached the glass. She remembers me, Milo whispered, awe in his voice. Dana glanced at Helen, who had pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Are you okay? Dana asked softly. Helen nodded, unable to speak. Amara stopped a foot from the glass, studying Milo intently. Then, with deliberate care, she sat on the floor and placed her massive hand against the barrier. Milo immediately mirrored her, his small palm pressed against hers. Look, Dana said quietly. She's brought something. Clutched in Amara's other hand was a scrap of bright fabric, a piece of an enrichment toy that had been placed in her habitat that morning. With careful movements, she placed it before her, smoothing it flat against the floor. What's she doing? Helen asked, finally moving closer. I think she's showing him something, Dana replied, fascination in her voice. Gorillas use objects as a form of communication sometimes, especially with humans they trust. Amara began making a soft vocalization, a kind of humming punctuated by gentle hoots. Her free hand moved to her chest, then outward toward Milo in a fluid gesture. That's one of the signs we taught her, Dana explained, excitement mounting. It means friend or family, depending on context. Milo, without prompting, lifted his hand and copied the gesture perfectly. Helen gasped. How does he know that? We never taught him sign language. Memory is a mysterious thing, Dana said, especially early memory. Some studies suggest that even if we can't consciously recall experiences from our first few years, they may still shape our responses and reaction. Amara made another sound, a soft grunt followed by a tapping of her fingers on the floor. Milo immediately responded with the familiar pattern, 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. I'm here with you, Helen translated involuntarily, then caught herself, eyes widening. Dana turned to her. Did James use that with you too? Across from them, Amara had begun arranging the fabric in a small depression on the floor, creating what looked like a miniature nest. Her movements were precise, tender. Dana and Helen exchanged startled glances. Why do you say that, sweetheart? Helen asked. Milo shrugged. Because she misses her baby, like you miss Dad. He's right, Dana confirmed gently. That's classic maternal displacement behavior. When great apes lose infants, they sometimes transfer their nurturing behaviors to objects, rocks, sticks, pieces of cloth. Amara finished arranging her makeshift nest, then looked expectantly at Milo. She tapped the empty fabric bundle, then pointed at him. I think she wants you to show her something, Dana suggested. My worry stone, he explained, holding it up to the glass. Dad found it. Mom gave it to me after. Helen moved closer, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. After your father died, she finished softly. James found it on our last camping trip. He said the stripe through the middle looked like a smile. Sure enough, a thin white quartz line ran through the stone's center, curving gently upward like a miniature smile. Milo held it against the glass for Amara to see. Milo's eyes widened. She says I'm here with you? He exclaimed. Helen knelt beside her son, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. For the first time since entering the room, she looked directly at Amara. The gorilla met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between the two mothers. One human, one not, both acquainted with grief. We're all speaking the same language, Dana said quietly. The language of loss and memory, Helen added, her voice stronger now. Amara shifted position, moving to retrieve something else from the back of her enclosure. When she returned, she carried a large rubber ball, bright red with yellow stars weathered from years of use. That's one of her oldest enrichment toys, Dana explained. We've tried to replace it several times, but she always prefers this one. Amara placed the ball carefully next to her fabric nest. Then, with her finger, she traced a star shape on the glass. Milo gasped. Mom, look, that's the star game. Helen turned to her son in astonishment. You remember that? I think so, Milo said, sounding surprised at himself. He turned to Dana. Dad used to draw stars on the glass with his finger, and Amara would find the star on her ball and touch it. Dana made a note on her clipboard, pulse quickening with scientific excitement. This is extraordinary. She's recreating specific interactions from 5 years ago, and Milo is responding with implicit memory knowledge he doesn't consciously recall but can still access. Helen watched her son, wonder replacing the pain in her eyes. All this time I thought those memories were gone. I thought he was too young. The brain remembers, even when we don't, Dana said. And clearly, so does Amara's. The gorilla was now sitting perfectly still, watching them with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold more understanding than should be possible. She reached out once more to tap the glass gently. Milo responded with the same pattern, then spontaneously added a new one. 2 quick taps, a pause, then 3 slow ones. Amara tilted her massive head, then carefully repeated the new pattern. "What does that one mean?" Dana asked. Milo looked up at his mother. "I don't know. It just felt right." Helen's breath caught. "That was another one of James's codes. 2 quick for don't worry, 3 slow for I'll return." "Don't worry, I'll return," Dana repeated softly. For the next 30 minutes, they watched in wonder as Amara continued retrieving objects from around her habitat, each one seemingly random until Milo or Helen recognized its significance. A yellow leaf that matched the color of a shirt James had often worn, a stick shaped like the letter M, a smooth round stone similar to Milo's own worry stone. Throughout it all, the tapping conversations continued, evolving and expanding as Milo instinctively remembered or created new patterns, which Amara faithfully mirrored. "She's been collecting these things," Dana realized aloud. "All this time we thought she was withdrawn, unresponsive. She's been gathering objects that reminded her of Milo and the bonding sessions." "Like a memory box," Helen murmured, her resistance finally dissolving completely as she knelt beside her son at the glass. When it was finally time to leave, Milo placed his hand on the glass one last time. "Bye, Amara. I'll come back soon." The gorilla pressed her palm against his, then made the sign for family again, looking directly at Helen as she did so. Helen, after a moment's hesitation, raised her hand and made the sign in return. As they walked back toward Dana's office, Helen's steps were lighter, her shoulders no longer rigid with tension. "I never thought coming back here would feel healing," Dana suggested. Helen nodded. "For both of us, it seems." "Do you think she misses me?" Milo asked without looking up, selecting a charcoal pencil for the gorilla's dark eyes. Helen cradled her coffee mug, warming her hands against the ceramic. "I'm sure she does, sweetheart." The phone call had come the previous evening. Dana Levine asking if they would consider another visit. Amara, she explained, had stationed herself at the observation window for hours after they'd left, refusing food and enrichment activities unless they were offered near the glass. Helen had hesitated, conflicted. Part of her wanted to protect Milo from forming an attachment that could end in more loss. Another part recognized something healing in the connection between her son and the gorilla. Milo's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Did I really know Amara when I was little? With Dad?" Helen's fingers tightened around her mug. They hadn't talked much about those weekly visits to the zoo. In the aftermath of James's death, she had focused on moving forward, on establishing new routines that didn't constantly remind them of his absence. The zoo and everything associated with it had been deliberately left behind. "Yes," she said finally, crossing to the table and sitting beside him. "Every Tuesday afternoon for 6 months. Your dad called it your special adventure." Milo's pencil stilled on the paper. "I don't really remember him," he admitted in a small voice. "Just bits and pieces, like his laugh, and how his beard tickled when he hugged me." Helen swallowed hard. "You were very young when he died, but Amara remembers," Milo said, looking up with those serious eyes that were so like James's. "She remembers me from back then. It seems that way. So, maybe," Milo hesitated, then rushed on, "maybe she remembers Dad too. Maybe she could help me remember more." The question caught Helen unprepared, opening a door she had kept firmly closed. Before she could formulate a response, there was a knock at the front door. "That's Dana," she said, grateful for the interruption. The zookeeper had offered to drive them to the special observation area today, avoiding the crowds of the public entrance. Milo quickly gathered his drawings, carefully inserting them into a folder, while Helen went to answer the door. Dana stood on the porch, rain beading on her waterproof jacket, a gentle smile on her face. "Thanks for agreeing to this," she said as Helen ushered her inside. "The entire team is fascinated by what's happening. We've never documented anything quite like it." We're still experimenting, Helen cautioned, lowering her voice so Milo wouldn't hear. I'm not ready to commit to regular visits yet. Dana nodded. Of course. We're following your lead. The drive to the zoo passed pleasantly, with Dana sharing stories about Amara's history at the facility and Milo asking dozens of questions from the back seat. Helen remained quieter, watching raindrops race down the passenger window, her mind drifting back to another rainy day 5 years ago. You're going to get soaked, Helen had called, laughing as James sprinted across the zoo parking lot without an umbrella, Milo bundled against his chest in a baby carrier. We're having an adventure, aren't we, buddy? James had replied, tickling their son under the chin. A little rain just makes it more exciting. At 2.5, Milo had giggled, reaching tiny hands toward the falling drops. Wet, wet, he'd exclaimed, one of the few words in his limited vocabulary. Wayne, Milo had attempted, bringing another burst of delighted laughter from his father. Inside the primate house, they'd shaken off the rain and headed straight for Amara's habitat. The pregnant gorilla had recognized them immediately, abandoning her breakfast to lumber toward the glass where her humans waited. Look at her belly, James had whispered, awe in his voice. She's getting so close, just like you were. Just like you, James had murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Those Tuesday afternoons had become sacred to them, a family ritual that connected them not just to each other, but to something larger. James, an elementary school science teacher, had been fascinated by the research aspects. Helen, still recovering from a difficult postpartum period, had found unexpected comfort in Amara's steady presence and maternal instincts. And Milo had blossomed. The speech-delayed toddler had begun communicating more, first through tapping games and mimicry, then with actual words. Go-go for gorilla, Dada for James, Mama for both Helen and, curiously, Amara. Helen. Dana's voice pulled her back to the present. They had arrived at the staff entrance, rain still falling steadily around them. Sorry, Helen murmured, just remembering. Dana's eyes showed understanding. Those memories are precious. I hope today brings more of them back for both of you. Inside, they bypassed the main visitor areas, taking a series of staff-only corridors that smelled of disinfectant and fresh straw. Milo walked between them, clutching his folder of drawings, his expression serious with anticipation. We've prepared something special, Dana explained. As they approached the observation room, Dr. Reeves approved a limited interaction that we think might be meaningful. Helen raised an eyebrow. What kind of interaction? You'll see, Dana said, with a small smile, opening the door. The observation room had been transformed since their last visit. The large viewing window remained, but now a small table had been set up nearby, containing what looked like scientific equipment, a tablet computer, speakers, and a camera on a tripod. This is Mark, Dana introduced a young man, adjusting the equipment. He's our technology specialist and has been helping us document Amara's behaviors. Mark waved. Great to meet you both officially. Milo, I've heard you're quite the artist. Are those drawings for Amara? Milo nodded, clutching the folder tighter. Perfect. We've set up a way for you to share them with her. Mark explained, gesturing to the tablet. This connects to a screen we've installed in her habitat, completely gorilla-proof. I promise, you can display your drawings for her to see. Milo's eyes widened. Really? Dana nodded. We use similar technology for cognitive testing with our primates. It's completely safe. Helen moved to the window, scanning the habitat beyond. Where is she? Waiting, Dana said softly, pointing to a shadowy corner where Amara sat quietly, her attention already fixed on the observation room. She was here before the morning keepers arrived. There was something different about the gorilla today. A calmness, an expectancy that hadn't been present before. She sat with perfect stillness, only her eyes moving as they tracked Helen's approach to the glass. She recognizes you too, Dana observed. Helen felt a strange tightness in her chest. It's been 5 years. For great apes, especially females, social memory can span decades, Dana explained. In the wild, Gorillas who are separated from their natal groups can recognize relatives years later. Mark finished setting up the equipment and beckoned to Milo. Want to try sending her one of your drawings? While Milo worked with Mark, Helen continued studying Amara through the glass. The gorilla returned her gaze with equal intensity, something almost human in the depth of her dark eyes. Was she part of the program the whole time? Helen asked quietly. Dana nodded. From beginning to end, she was our most responsive participant. The bond she formed with your family was particularly strong. James was convinced she understood everything we said, Helen remembered, a sad smile touching her lips. He used to read nature books aloud during our sessions, saying she enjoyed the sound of his voice. He might have been right, Dana said. Gorillas can't speak like we do because of their vocal anatomy, but their comprehension can be remarkable. Coco, a gorilla who was taught sign language, could understand approximately 2,000 words of spoken English. A soft electronic chime sounded, and the conversation paused as they turned toward the habitat. On a sturdy screen mounted high on the far wall, one of Milo's drawings appeared. Amara with her red star ball, rendered in careful detail with colored pencils. Amara's reaction was immediate. She rose to her feet, approaching the screen with cautious curiosity. She studied the image, then looked toward the observation window where Milo stood watching nervously. She likes it, Mark said, grinning as Amara reached toward the screen, her massive fingers gently touching the digital image. Try another one, Dana encouraged. Milo selected a second drawing. This one showing Amara and himself sitting at the glass, hands pressed together. When it appeared on the screen, Amara made a soft hooting sound, then moved to retrieve something from her nest in the corner. She returned, carrying what looked like a crumpled piece of paper. What is that? Helen asked, leaning closer. Dana squinted. It looks like… Yes, it's one of the enrichment materials we gave her last week. Special paper that's safe for the animals. The keepers provide art supplies, sometimes, as cognitive stimulation. Amara flattened the crumpled paper against the floor of her enclosure, revealing crude markings in various colors, lines and circles created by dragging markers across the surface. In the center was a distinct circular shape with radiating lines. She made a star, Milo whispered in awe. She's showing us her own drawing, Dana confirmed, excitement evident in her voice. This is unprecedented. She's not just responding to communication, she's initiating it. Helen watched as Amara carefully arranged her drawing where they could see it clearly, then looked expectantly toward Milo. The parallel was unmistakable. A child showing his artwork to Amara, and Amara showing hers in return. May I? Helen asked, gesturing toward the tablet. Mark nodded, showing her how to operate the simple interface. Helen scrolled through old photographs stored on her phone until she found what she was looking for, a picture from 5 years ago. James sitting cross-legged on the floor of the observation area, toddler Milo in his lap, both smiling at the camera. With trembling fingers, she transferred the image to the tablet and sent it to the screen in Amara's enclosure. The gorilla went completely still. For several long moments, she simply stared at the photograph, her massive body frozen in place. Then, with deliberate slowness, she approached the screen and placed her palm against James's image. "Oh!" Helen breathed, a sound somewhere between pain and wonder. Amara turned to face the observation window, making direct eye contact with Helen. Then, with unmistakable purpose, she tapped against the screen 3 times, pause 2 times. "I'm here with you," Helen translated automatically, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom?" Milo tugged at her sleeve, confusion on his face. "Why is Amara doing Dad's tap code?" Helen knelt beside her son, struggling to find words to explain what she herself barely understood. I think she's telling us that she remembers Dad too, that in some way, he's still here with us." Milo studied the gorilla, thoughtfully. "Like how you said Dad is always watching over us, even though we can't see him." "Something like that," Helen whispered. Diana and Mark exchanged glances, tactfully stepping back to give the family privacy in this unexpected moment. Amara remained at the screen, her eyes moving between the photograph and the humans watching her. She made the sign for family again, then added another gesture, both hands curled inward toward her chest, then opening outward as if offering something. "That's a new one," Dana noted quietly. "I'm not sure what it means." "Sharing," Helen said with certainty. "It means sharing." At Dana's questioning look, she explained, "James used that motion when teaching Milo to share his toys. Gather in, then offer out." The realization hit her like a physical force. All these years she had thought she was protecting Milo by sealing away the past, by not talking about James, by avoiding places that would trigger painful memories. Yet here was Amara, a gorilla, showing her what she'd missed. Memories weren't just sources of pain, they were treasures to be shared. "Milo," she said softly, "would you like me to tell you about the times we came here with Dad? About the games you played with Amara?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Yes, all of it." And so, with Amara watching attentively from her enclosure, Helen began to share stories she had kept locked away for 5 years. She told Milo about how James would lift him up to see better when Amara approached the glass, about the time Amara had brought all her blankets to the window when Milo had come in sniffling with a cold, about James teaching both Milo and Amara to draw stars with their fingers. With each story, Helen felt something shift inside her. Pain transforming not into absence, but into something softer, something that could be carried without breaking her. "He loved coming here," she concluded, arm around her son's shoulders. "These visits were the highlight of his week." "Mine too," Milo said, then added thoughtfully, "and Amara's, I think." Dana, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward again. "I have something that might interest you both," she said, pulling a small USB drive from her pocket. "When I was going through the archives, I found some footage from the bonding program. There are several clips of your family with Amara." Helen stared at the small device. "I didn't know they recorded the sessions." "For research purposes," Dana explained. "The footage has never been used publicly. It's been in storage all this time." Helen took the drive, closing her fingers around it tightly. "Thank you," she said quietly. Across from them, Amara had settled on the floor, her attention still fixed on the photograph of James and Milo. She made no move to turn away or engage with other enrichment items in her enclosure. She simply watched, as if keeping vigil. "She really does remember him," Helen murmured, more to herself than the others. Dana nodded. "Memory is one of the greatest gifts evolutionary biology has given us, humans and great apes alike. It lets us carry those we love, even when they're gone." As they prepared to leave, Milo placed his hand against the glass one more time. Amara immediately responded, her massive palm dwarfing his. "We'll come back," Helen promised, not just to her son, but to the gorilla watching them with knowing eyes. "We'll come back and remember together." The USB drive sat untouched on Helen's kitchen counter for 3 days. Each time she passed it, her fingers would hover, hesitant, before continuing on with whatever task had brought her to the kitchen. It wasn't that she didn't want to see the footage, it was that she didn't trust herself with it, didn't trust the flood of emotions that would inevitably follow. Milo had no such reservations. "Can we watch it tonight?" he asked, each morning, his dark eyes hopeful. "Please?" It was Saturday evening when she finally relented. They ordered pizza, built a nest of blankets on the living room sofa, and Helen plugged the drive into their television with trembling hands. The first video began playing, slightly grainy security footage from 5 years ago. The observation room looked much the same, though the technology had been updated since then. And there they were, James sitting cross-legged on the floor, Milo toddling unsteadily between his father's supportive hands, Helen laughing at something out of frame. "That's really Dad," Milo whispered, leaning forward. "And me." "That's really you," Helen confirmed, her throat tight. On screen, James was pointing toward the glass, his expression animated as he spoke to toddler Milo. The camera angle shifted, showing Amaro on the other side, watching them intently. The gorilla had been younger then, her movements more energetic, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What was Dad saying?" Milo asked. Helen closed her eyes briefly, the memory washing over her. He was telling you about Amara's baby. See how round her belly is. There. She was pregnant, like all the gorillas in the program. The footage continued, showing weeks of visits compressed into a montage of moments. James teaching Milo to tap patterns on the glass. Amara responding with growing comprehension. Helen taking photographs, while James narrated everything for their son. You were so little, Helen said softly, but you never cried or fussed during those visits. You were always completely focused on Amara. And Dad, Milo added, his eyes never leaving the screen. I was focused on Dad too. Yes, she whispered. You adored him. The final clip was dated the day of the accident. Helen almost asked Milo to turn it off, but something stopped her. Perhaps the eager light in her son's eyes, perhaps her own growing recognition that running from the memories had served neither of them well. On screen, James held toddler Milo against the glass where Amara waited, her pregnancy now in its final weeks. James was guiding Milo's small hand in drawing a star shape on the glass, while Amara watched attentively. Dad's teaching her the star game, Milo said, recognition filling his voice. Then came a moment that stole Helen's breath. James turned toward the camera, his face alight with joy, and spoke directly to whoever was filming. Make sure you get this, honey. This is one for the memory books. Memory books. That had been James's phrase for the moments he insisted they document. Milo's first steps, his first attempts at speech. Birthdays, holidays, ordinary Tuesdays made special by attention and love. The footage ended there, frozen on James's smiling face. Helen and Milo sat in silence as the television returned to its home screen, the spell of the past slowly releasing them. He was nice, Milo finally said, his voice small. Helen pulled him close. He was wonderful, and he loved you so much, Milo. So very much. That night, after Milo had gone to bed, Helen searched through boxes she had stored in the attic, containers of James's belongings that she had packed away after his death. Unable to face them daily but unwilling to discard them, near the bottom of one box she found what she was looking for, a leather-bound journal with field notes embossed on the cover. James had carried it to every zoo visit, documenting observations with the meticulous attention of the science teacher he was. Helen opened it carefully, her fingers tracing his familiar handwriting. Tuesday, April 18. Milo's verbal response to Amara increased significantly today. 4 distinct attempts at gorilla, still coming out as go-go, and clear excitement upon seeing her. Amara recognized us immediately, even before we reached the glass, brought her blankets to the viewing area just as we arrived. Anticipatory behavior. Must discuss with researchers. She turned pages, each one filled with James's thoughts, his wonder at the connection forming between their son and the gorilla, his theories about animal cognition and emotional intelligence. Tuesday, May 12th. Breakthrough today. Amara mimicked our tapping sequence perfectly. 3 taps. I'm here. 2 taps. With you. Repeated it back to Milo. Then innovated with 2.1, which we hadn't taught her. Researcher Dana thinks this might be creative application rather than simple mimicry. Amazing to witness. Ellen read until her eyes grew heavy, immersing herself in James's voice, his perspective, his love for these Tuesday adventures. On the final page, dated the day of the accident, he had written only one line: some bonds transcend understanding. They simply must be honored. The next morning, Helen called Dana. We'd like to come back, she said simply. Not just once. Regularly. And so began a new routine. Every Tuesday afternoon, the same day they had visited years before, Helen would pick Milo up from school and drive to Jefferson Park Zoo, where Dana would meet them at the staff entrance. They would spend an hour with Amara in the private observation area, away from the public exhibits. Helen found herself sleeping better, the crushing weight of unexpressed grief gradually lightening. She began bringing James's journal to the sessions, sometimes reading entries aloud to Dana, to Milo, and yes, to Amara, who would sit attentively at the glass, as if understanding every word. And Amara, her transformation was perhaps the most profound. The depressed, withdrawn gorilla, who had refused food and interaction after losing her infant, began to re-engage with her world. She started accepting enrichment activities again, interacting with other gorillas, responding to her keepers. Her appetite has returned to normal, Dana reported during their 4th weekly visit, and she's rejoined group grooming sessions with the troop. The veterinary team is thrilled with her progress. Without fail, Dana confirmed. We don't even have to call her anymore. She's always waiting when we arrive. As their sessions continued, they developed new routines. Milo would bring drawings to share via the digital screen. Helen would read passages from James's journal. Dana would introduce cognitive games designed to stimulate Amara's problem-solving abilities. One Tuesday in late July, Dana met them with barely contained excitement. "We've got something special today," she told them as they walked through the staff corridors. "Dr. Reeves has approved a limited physical interaction." Helen stopped walking.
What does that mean exactly?
"Nothing dangerous," Dana assured her quickly. "We've modified part of the viewing area to include a protected contact zone, a reinforced mesh panel where limited supervised touch is possible. It's something we use with our ambassador animals and in our enrichment programs with some of the great apes." "You mean Milo could actually touch her?" Helen asked, concern evident in her voice. "Under extremely controlled conditions," Dana explained, "the contact zone is designed so that only fingers can pass through, similar to how keepers might offer treats or perform health checks. Amara has been trained with this system for years." Helen hesitated, maternal protection warring with the recognition of how meaningful such an interaction could be. "What do you think, Milo?" The boy's eyes were wide. "Could I really?" Dana nodded. "We've been observing Amara's behavior carefully. Her stress indicators are at baseline levels now. Her aggression markers are non-existent, and she's shown nothing but gentle interest in your visits. Dr. Reeves wouldn't have approved this if there were any significant safety concerns." After further discussion and a detailed explanation of the safety protocols, Helen finally agreed. They entered the observation room to find it slightly reconfigured. A small section of the viewing wall now featured a reinforced mesh panel about the size of a school notebook, positioned at Milo's height. "We'll call Amara now," Dana said, pressing the familiar chime button. "And remember, this is entirely optional for both Milo and Amara. Either can choose not to participate." Amara appeared more quickly than usual, moving purposefully toward the contact zone, as if she understood what was being offered. She sat before the mesh, her dark eyes moving from Milo to Helen, and back again. "She's calm," Dana observed, checking vital signs on a small monitor. "Heart rate normal, respiration even." Milo approached slowly, following Dana's careful instructions. "Hi, Amara," he said softly. "It's me." The gorilla watched him intently, then did something remarkable. She extended one finger toward the mesh, pushing it partially through one of the small openings. "She's inviting contact," Dana whispered, awe in her voice. "This is her choice." With infinite care, Milo reached up and gently touched his finger to Amara's. The contact was minimal, just the tips of their fingers meeting through the protective barrier, but the significance was profound. Human and gorilla, connected not just by glass or technology, but by actual touch, bridging 5 years of separation and loss. Helen found she couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe as she watched her son experience this extraordinary moment. From the corner of her eye, she saw Dana discreetly wiping away a tear while maintaining her professional observation. "Her skin feels warm," Milo said, wonder filling his voice, "and a little bumpy." Amara remained perfectly still, allowing the contact for several seconds before slowly withdrawing her finger. She then made the sign for family, followed by the sharing gesture that had become part of their regular communication. "I think that's enough for today," Dana said gently. "Always best to keep first interactions brief and positive." As they prepared to leave, Helen noticed something different in Milo's expression. A quieter confidence, a centeredness that hadn't been there before. He seemed older somehow, more at peace. "Thank you," she said to Dana, as they walked back through the staff corridors, "for everything." Dana smiled. "I'm just facilitating. The real work is happening between them." She hesitated, then added, "And maybe for you too." Helen nodded, unable to deny it. James always said that Amara helped him see the world differently, more directly, more honestly. I think I'm finally understanding what he meant. That night, Helen added her own entry to James's journal, the first time she had written in it since his death. Tuesday, July 25. Today our son touched a gorilla's hand and found his father's heart. Some bonds truly do transcend understanding. They simply must be honored. The video was never meant to reach beyond the walls of Jefferson Park Zoo. It had been captured on Mark's phone during a routine Tuesday visit. 30 seconds of Milo and Amara, engaged in their tapping conversation through the glass, fingers moving in synchronized patterns that spoke of a connection deeper than words. Mark had shared it with the primate care team as documentation of Amara's ongoing recovery. Dr. Reeves had forwarded it to the zoo's board of directors as evidence that their investment in the special visitation program was showing results. Someone on the board, no one would later admit, who had posted it to their personal social media account with the simple caption, "After losing her baby, this gorilla recognized a boy she hadn't seen in 5 years. The language of grief transcends species." By Wednesday morning, the clip had been viewed 2.3 million times. Dana was still at home when her phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. She scrolled through dozens of messages from colleagues, then watched the video spreading across platforms, commentary multiplying beneath it, like bacteria in a petri dish. "I'm literally sobbing right now. This is why we need to protect these magnificent creatures." Skeptical. Probably just trained behavior being misinterpreted. The way she taps back exactly the same pattern. Animals are so much more than we give them credit for. Her coffee forgotten. Dana dialed Helen's number with shaking fingers. "Have you seen it?" she asked, when Helen answered. "Seen what?" "Check your email. I just sent you a link. Someone leaked footage of Milo and Amara. It's going viral." There was silence, then the soft sounds of Helen's breathing, as she presumably opened the email. "Oh no," she whispered after a moment. "I'm so sorry," Dana said. "This was never authorized. We're trying to figure out who shared it." "Milo's face is clearly visible," Helen said, her voice tightening. "His school uniform is recognizable. I know the zoo's PR team is working to have it removed. But it's already everywhere," Helen finished for her. "How could this happen?" Dana had no good answer. The Tuesday visits had always been conducted with the utmost privacy, a sanctuary for both the grieving mother and son and the recovering gorilla. Now that sacred space had been violated, transformed into public entertainment. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Dana promised. "We'll figure this out together." By the time she arrived at the Matthews home, the situation had escalated. Helen's phone was ringing continuously with calls from news outlets and talk show producers. Their neighbor had reported seeing a news van parked at the end of the street. "This is a nightmare," Helen said, pacing the living room. "Milo doesn't need this kind of attention. Not about his father, not about any of it." Milo sat cross-legged on the sofa, unusually quiet as he listened to the adults discuss the crisis. "Are people mad at us for visiting Amara?" he finally asked. "No, sweetheart," Helen said quickly, sitting beside him. "People are just very interested in your special connection with her. But we need to protect your privacy," Dana added, "and Amara's well-being. Too much attention could be stressful for her." The boy nodded solemnly. "We should help her, not be stressed." Helen's phone rang again. The school principal this time. 3 reporters had shown up, asking to interview Milo's teachers about the gorilla whisperer in their 2nd grade class. While Helen dealt with the call, Dana received her own emergency notification. Dr. Reeves was requesting her immediate presence at the zoo. Amara's habitat was surrounded by visitors, some of whom had begun tapping on the glass, attempting to recreate the viral moment for their own videos. I have to go, she told Helen, apologetically. We need to manage the situation at Amara's habitat. Helen nodded, distracted by her conversation with the principal. Dana squeezed Milo's shoulder reassuringly before heading out, stopping short when she noticed a news crew setting up equipment directly across the street. This is out of control, she muttered, ducking into her car before they could spot her. At the zoo, conditions were even worse. A line of visitors stretched beyond the main entrance, many clutching phones, eager to capture their own footage of the famous gorilla. Inside, staff members were stationed around Amara's habitat, enforcing viewing rules and attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy. There you are, Dr. Reeves called, waving Dana over to the administrative offices. We've got a situation. I've seen the crowd, Dana acknowledged, following him inside. How's Amara handling it? She's retreated to the indoor portion of the habitat, he explained. Smart girl, keeping herself away from the chaos. But that's not why I called you in. He led her to the conference room where several people were already seated. The zoo's director, the head of public relations, and two board members, all wearing expressions that ranged from concern to barely concealed excitement. Dana, we need to discuss how to handle this unexpected publicity, the director began. The video has generated more interest in our gorilla program than we've seen in a decade. With all due respect, Dana interrupted. Our primary concern should be protecting Amara and the Matthews family. This attention could be detrimental to both. Of course, the PR director agreed smoothly. But we also have a unique opportunity here to educate the public about great ape cognition, emotional intelligence, and conservation efforts. Dana felt a growing uneasiness. What exactly are you proposing? A controlled media event, the PR director explained, sliding a folder across the table. One press conference with carefully selected outlets. We showcase the bond between Amara and the boy, explain the science behind it, and highlight our conservation initiatives. No, Dana said flatly. Helen Matthews would never agree to that, and it would be incredibly disruptive to Amara's routine. We could make it worth their while, one of the board members suggested, a donation to the family, or perhaps a college fund for the boy. Dana stared at them, unable to hide her dismay. Are you suggesting we pay them to put their personal tragedy on display? The meeting continued for an hour, with Dana firmly defending the privacy and well-being of both Amara and the Matthews family against increasingly creative proposals to capitalize on the viral moment. She left feeling drained and disillusioned, only to find Mark waiting anxiously outside her office. We've got another problem, he said, leading her toward the primate center. Dr. Lindbergh is here. Dana groaned inwardly. Dr. Eleanor Lindbergh was a prominent primatologist from a competing research institution known for her skepticism about emotional intelligence in non-human primates. She had been a vocal critic of the zoo's bonding program years ago, dismissing it as anthropomorphic projection with no scientific validity. Who authorized her visit? Dana demanded. No one, Mark admitted. She just showed up with press credentials. The director thought it might be good to have a counterpoint perspective for the media narrative. They found Dr. Lindbergh in the observation area adjacent to Amara's habitat, watching the gorilla through the glass with calculating eyes. Unlike the excited visitors clamoring for a glimpse of the famous gorilla, Dr. Lindbergh's scrutiny was clinical. Assessing, Dr. Levine, she greeted Dana without warmth. I see your facility is enjoying quite the publicity boost from this video. That was never our intention, Dana replied evenly. The footage was shared without authorization. Dr. Lindbergh made a note on her tablet. And this special relationship between the gorilla and the boy, you're claiming it's based on memory recognition from 5 years ago. We have documented evidence of their prior relationship during our bonding program, Dana explained, keeping her voice professional despite her growing irritation. And Amara's response patterns strongly suggest recognition, or conditioning. Dr. Lindbergh countered. Gorillas are intelligent animals capable of learning routines that result in rewards. What enrichment items or food motivators are you using during these sessions? None, Dana said firmly. These are not training sessions. They're supervised visits, based on a pre-existing relationship. Dr. Lindbergh raised a skeptical eyebrow. And you don't think you're projecting human emotions onto normal primate behavior? The tapping sequence, for instance? That could be simple mimicry, not some emotional code about presence and connection. Before Dana could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Helen. News crews everywhere. School called. Milo staying home today. What should we do? Excuse me, Dana said to Dr. Lindbergh. I have an urgent matter to attend to. She stepped away to call Helen, who answered immediately, her voice tight with stress. They found us, Dana. Someone at Milo's school must have given them our address. There are reporters on our front lawn. Stay inside, Dana advised. Don't engage with anyone. I'm going to send our security team to help manage the situation. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Helen said, frustration evident in her voice. Milo's been asking questions about why people care so much about him. And Amara, how do I explain this to him? Dana closed her eyes briefly, wishing she had better answers. I'm so sorry, Helen. The zoo is working to manage this situation as quickly as possible. After arranging for security to assist at the Matthews home, Dana returned to find Dr. Lindbergh still watching Amara, who had ventured back into the visible portion of her habitat, but was keeping to the farthest corner. Your gorilla appears stressed, Dr. Lindbergh commented. Increased vigilance, minimal foraging, preference for protected spaces, all indicators of elevated anxiety. For once, Dana couldn't disagree with her assessment. The sudden increase in visitors and activity levels is disrupting her routine, and yet you're continuing to expose her to a child for these special visits, Dr. Lindbergh noted, making another entry on her tablet. Interesting choice. The structured visits with Milo have been beneficial for her recovery, Dana insisted. Her depression symptoms have decreased significantly since they began. Correlation isn't causation, Dr. Levine. Dr. Lindbergh tucked her tablet under her arm. I'll be presenting an alternative analysis of this case at next month's Primate Conservation Conference. I hope you'll attend. After Dr. Lindbergh departed, Dana checked on Amara once more. The gorilla was now sitting with her back to the public viewing area, deliberately avoiding the crowds trying to capture her attention through the glass. Dana's phone rang. The zoo director again, requesting another emergency meeting. This time, Helen and Milo had been invited to attend. Absolutely not, Dana protested. They're already overwhelmed by the media attention. Helen Matthews called us directly, the director countered. She has a proposal of her own. Surprised, Dana made her way back to the conference room, where she found Helen and Milo already seated, looking tired but determined. The director and PR team watched them with barely concealed eagerness. Helen, Dana began, you didn't have to come in. We could have handled this. We needed to, Helen said firmly. This situation affects us directly, and we should have a say in how it's managed. The director nodded approvingly. Miss Matthews has a very sensible suggestion that could benefit everyone involved. Helen straightened in her chair. I've spoken with Milo about this, and we've made a decision. We're willing to participate in one, and only one, controlled media event, under specific conditions. Dana listened, with growing surprise as Helen outlined her terms. A single press conference, where the scientific aspects of animal cognition would be the focus, with limited personal questions and no exploitation of James's death or their family story. All proceeds from any increased zoo attendance would be directed to gorilla conservation efforts, with a portion specifically designated for research into grief responses in great apes. Most importantly, Helen concluded, we want assurances that Amara's routine won't be disrupted. Her well-being comes first. Of course, the director agreed readily, perhaps too readily for Dana's comfort. Why? Dana asked Helen quietly, as the others discussed logistics. Why agree to any of this? Helen's expression softened as she glanced at Milo, who was doodling gorillas on a notepad. Because running from attention doesn't work. I learned that with grief, better to face it directly, shape the narrative ourselves, than let it pass. Milo looked up from his drawing. And maybe it will help other gorillas too. Dad would have liked that. Dana hadn't thought about it that way. Perhaps there was an opportunity here not for exploitation, but for education. If they could channel this viral fascination toward meaningful awareness about great ape cognition and emotional lives, perhaps some good could come from this unwanted spotlight. Okay, she said finally. But I'll be monitoring everything to ensure neither you nor Amara is overwhelmed. We're counting on it, Helen said, managing a tired smile. As meetings continued throughout the day, plans taking shape for the carefully controlled press event, Dana watched Milo sitting quietly with his drawings, seemingly unperturbed by the commotion around him. He had an old soul's calmness, a quality that perhaps Amara had recognized from the beginning. Some bonds, Dana reflected, were strong enough to withstand not just the passage of time, but the glare of public attention. The challenge now was to protect that bond, while allowing others to learn from it. The Jefferson Park Zoo's auditorium had never hosted such a diverse audience. Local reporters jostled for space alongside documentary filmmakers and wildlife photographers. Academic researchers occupied the front rows, notebooks and tablets, ready. At the back, conservation advocates and animal rights representatives watched with cautious interest. On stage, a panel had been arranged. Anna at one end, Helen and Milo in the center, flanked by Dr. Reeves and the zoo director. Behind them, a large screen displayed a carefully edited compilation of footage showing Amara's interactions with Milo over the past several weeks. "Thank you all for coming," the zoo director began, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to public speaking. "We've organized this informational session to address the significant interest in what many are calling an extraordinary case of cross-species recognition and emotional memory." The first 30 minutes proceeded as planned. Dr. Reeves presented clinical data about Amara's health improvements since the reconnection with Milo. Dana explained the scientific context, discussing studies of great ape cognition and emotional processing. Helen spoke briefly about their participation in the original bonding program, 5 years earlier, carefully avoiding any mention of James's death. Milo, dressed in a button-up shirt that made him look older than his 7 years, answered a few simple questions about his drawings and tapping games with Amara. "She remembers the patterns, even when I make new ones," he explained, his voice small but steady in the large room. "And she makes up her own patterns for me to copy." Then came the question and answer period, which quickly veered from scientific inquiry toward more sensational angles. "Ms. Matthews," called a reporter from a national morning show, "can you explain why you and your son stopped visiting Amara 5 years ago? Was there an incident?" Dana saw Helen stiffen, saw the momentary flash of pain cross her face before she composed herself. "We're focusing today on the scientific aspects of animal cognition," Helen replied evenly. "Our personal circumstances aren't relevant to understanding Amara's remarkable memory capabilities." Another hand shot up. "Dr. Levine, would you classify this as grief recognition between the gorilla and the boy? Are they bonding over shared loss?" Before Dana could respond, another voice cut through the auditorium, sharp, authoritative, and unmistakably skeptical. "What we're witnessing is a classic case of observer bias and anthropomorphic projection," Dr. Eleanor Lindbergh announced, rising from her seat in the front row. "These alleged memory patterns can be more parsimoniously explained as conditioned responses." The zoo director frowned. "Dr. Lindbergh, we'll be taking questions in an orderly fashion." "This isn't a question, it's a correction," she interrupted, approaching the stage uninvited. "The narrative being presented here lacks scientific rigor and risks misleading the public about gorilla cognition." Dana felt a surge of protective anger, not just for Amara but for Milo, who was watching the confrontation with wide eyes. "Dr. Lindbergh, we have documented evidence. Anecdotal observations," Dr. Lindbergh countered, now standing at the edge of the stage. "Touching stories about tapping codes and drawings make for viral videos, but poor science. Where are your controlled studies, your peer-reviewed publications on this case?" The audience stirred, sensing conflict, exactly what the carefully managed press conference had been designed to avoid. Cameras shifted toward Dr. Lindbergh, capturing her commanding presence and articulate critique. Perhaps, Dr. Lindbergh continued, addressing the audience directly now, we should consider the ethics of encouraging a child to form an attachment to an animal that cannot possibly understand the emotional significance humans are projecting onto it. This feels exploitative of both the boy and the gorilla. Dana saw Helen's hand tighten around Milo's shoulder, saw the growing distress on his face as he listened to this stranger dismiss his connection with Amara as imaginary. Before she could intervene, however, another voice joined the fray. I'd like to offer a different perspective, if I may. The voice belonged to a man in his 60s, who rose from the middle of the audience, distinguished-looking with silver hair and a thoughtful expression. He projected a calm authority that immediately commanded attention. Dr. Richard Samuels, he introduced himself, 30 years studying great ape cognition at the Leakey Foundation. I've been following this case with considerable interest. The zoo director, clearly relieved by this unexpected intervention, gestured him forward. We'd welcome your insights, Dr. Samuels. Dr. Samuels approached the stage, nodding respectfully to the panel before addressing the audience. The debate between anthropomorphism and strict behaviorism has been raging in our field for decades, he began. Dr. Lindbergh represents one end of the spectrum, the position that we should avoid attributing human-like emotions or cognitive processes to non-human animals. Dr. Lindbergh nodded approvingly, but Dr. Samuels wasn't finished. However, he continued, mounting evidence from cognitive ethology suggests this position is becoming increasingly untenable. Great apes, in particular, demonstrate complex emotional lives that may not be identical to human experience, but certainly parallel it in meaningful ways. He turned toward the screen, where a still image of Amara and Milo showed them with hands pressed together through the glass. What we're seeing here isn't necessarily a gorilla experiencing grief in the human sense. It's something potentially more interesting. A gorilla using her own species-specific emotional framework to form connections that persist through time and absence. The audience had gone completely silent, captivated by this nuanced perspective. The tapping behaviors, the object associations, the preference for this particular child, these aren't just conditioned responses. They represent a form of mental representation that includes social memory, emotional association, and perhaps something we might cautiously call attachment. Dr. Lindbergh frowned. You're speculating without data. On the contrary, Dr. Samuels countered. I've reviewed the documentation provided by Dr. Levine. The consistency of Amara's responses, particularly the immediacy of her recognition after 5 years of separation, suggests something far more complex than conditioning. He turned to address Milo directly, his expression softening. Young man, what you have with Amara is unique. Not because gorillas don't form meaningful connections, they absolutely do, but because circumstances allowed this particular connection to be documented and studied. Milo straightened slightly, reassured by the validation. The real scientific question, Dr. Samuels continued, addressing the entire room, isn't whether great apes have emotional lives. Decades of research have confirmed they do. The question is how these emotional capacities manifest in different contexts, particularly in cross-species interactions where traditional social cues may be absent or altered. As Dr. Samuels spoke, Dana noticed a shift in the room. The reporters who had been hungrily seeking emotional drama were now taking notes on cognitive ethology and the significance of Amara's behaviors. The conversation was elevating, becoming less about viral sensationalism and more about genuine understanding. Dr. Lindbergh, however, remained unconvinced. This kind of popular sentimentality undermines rigorous science. She insisted. Next, you'll be claiming the gorilla is communicating about its feelings through these tapping patterns. Not feelings as we conceptualize them, Dr. Samuels corrected, but communication. Absolutely. Great apes communicate constantly, both with conspecifics and with humans. The fascinating aspect here is that this gorilla appears to have maintained a communication system initially established with this child 5 years ago. A conservation biologist near the back raised her hand. Could this case have implications for gorilla protection efforts? If the public better understands their cognitive and emotional complexity. Precisely, Dr. Samuels agreed. Conservation isn't just about preserving genetic diversity or ecosystem function, though those are crucial. It's also about recognizing the intrinsic value of beings capable of rich social lives, long-term memory, and yes, meaningful relationships. The conversation continued in this vein, with various experts offering perspectives that ranged from Dr. Lindbergh's strict behaviorism to more integrative approaches that acknowledged both the scientific importance of careful methodology and the ethical implications of recognizing animal consciousness. Throughout it all, Milo remained quietly attentive, occasionally whispering questions to his mother or Dana. The boy seemed to understand, on some intuitive level, that these adults were debating something fundamental about his relationship with Amara, not whether it existed, but what it meant. When the formal session concluded, several researchers approached Helen and Milo, requesting to observe future interactions with Amara as part of more structured studies. Dr. Semmels in particular seemed keen to incorporate this case into a broader research initiative on long-term social memory in great apes. Would that be okay? Milo asked Dana as they gathered their belongings. Would it help Amara if more scientists watched us? Dana considered carefully. It might help other gorillas, she explained. If more people understand how intelligent and emotionally complex gorillas are, they might work harder to protect them in the wild. Milo nodded solemnly. Dad would have liked that. He always said knowledge is how we make the world better. As they left the auditorium, Dr. Lindbergh approached them one last time. I hope you understand my scientific reservations aren't personal, she said, somewhat stiffly. The advancement of knowledge requires skepticism. It also requires observation, Helen responded calmly. You're welcome to observe Milo and Amara yourself, if you'd like. See what conclusions you draw from direct experience, rather than theoretical positions. Dr. Lindbergh seemed taken aback by the invitation, but after a moment's consideration, she nodded. Perhaps I will. Later that afternoon, once the press had departed and the regular zoo visitors had thinned out, Dana arranged a private session for Milo and Amara. No researchers, no cameras, just the boy, the gorilla, and their unique form of communication. As soon as Amara spotted Milo at the glass, she approached quickly, abandoning the fruit she'd been eating. She placed her palm against the barrier, waiting for his matching gesture, then began their familiar tapping sequence. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. I'm here with you, Milo translated quietly. Dana watched as they settled into their routine, exchanging taps, sharing drawings through the digital interface. Amara retrieving objects to show Milo while he did the same. The simplicity of their interaction belied its profound implications. 2 beings from different species with different brains and evolutionary histories, finding common ground in basic rhythms of presence and attention. Whether this was memory as humans understood it, or communication in the linguistic sense, or something else entirely, seemed suddenly less important than the fact of its existence. Here, beyond the hypothesizing and the theoretical frameworks, was something real and observable. A gorilla who recognized a child she hadn't seen in 5 years, and a child who somehow understood what she was trying to tell him. Dr. Lindbergh doesn't believe Amara really remembers me, Milo said later as they were leaving, his voice troubled. What do you think? Dana asked gently. The boy considered this seriously, in that old soul way of his. I think some things you just know, even if you can't prove them to everyone. Dana smiled, squeezing his shoulder. That's a very wise perspective, Milo. And sometimes, with patience and careful observation, what we know intuitively eventually becomes what we can demonstrate scientifically. As they walked away, Dana glanced back to see Amara still watching them from the glass, her dark eyes following Milo until he disappeared from view. There was a stillness to her gaze, an attentiveness that seemed to transcend simple curiosity or conditioned response. Some bonds, Dana reflected, couldn't be fully captured by scientific terminology or experimental design. They existed in a space between knowing and feeling, between memory and presence, a space that both humans and gorillas, in their own ways, seemed capable of sharing. Dana's phone rang at 3:17 a.m., jolting her awake. "It's Mark. The transport arrived early. She's here." His voice was tense but controlled. "How's Amara reacting?" Dana asked, already getting dressed. "She's refusing to approach the crate. Won't even look at it." 20 minutes later, Dana stood watching the security feed from Amara's enclosure. The gorilla was huddled in the far corner, visibly anxious, while a transport crate containing a young orphaned female gorilla sat in the adjacent introduction area. The plan had been developing for weeks. The juvenile, orphaned by poachers at 6 months old, had been rehabilitated at a sanctuary, but struggled to integrate with their troops. When genetic testing revealed a distant relationship to Amara's bloodline, the cross-continental transfer had been arranged. After failed attempts with conventional methods, Dana made a difficult decision. "We need to call Helen. Bring Milo." Helen and Milo arrived in pajamas and hastily thrown on coats. Dana explained that Amara seemed to need his familiar presence to feel secure enough to approach the juvenile. "I can help," Milo said, with determination beyond his years. In the observation room, Milo settled into his usual spot and began their tapping sequence. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. "I'm here with you." Amara, seeing him, slowly uncurled from her defensive posture and approached the glass, returning his pattern. Then Milo added another, 2 quick taps, 3 slow ones. "Don't worry, I'll return." This reached Amara deeply. She turned toward the introduction area where the crate waited. On cue, a keeper began opening the crate, revealing the small, nervous juvenile inside. Amara approached cautiously, sitting a few feet away in a non-threatening posture. She retrieved a piece of fruit and placed it halfway between herself and the crate before backing away, a clear offering. Gradually, the little gorilla emerged, retrieving the fruit but clutching it protectively rather than eating it. Amara made a soft hooting sound, a maternal vocalization meant to reassure. After several tentative steps closer, the juvenile stopped, just outside touching range. Amara extended her hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. After a moment's hesitation, the little one placed her small hand in Amara's larger one, allowing the adult to draw her closer until they sat side by side. "She's not alone anymore," Milo said, beaming. "Neither of them is." As dawn approached, Helen and Milo prepared to leave. "Goodbye, Amara. Take good care of her," Milo said, pressing his hand to the glass. Amara, now, with the juvenile dozing against her side, tapped in response. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. "I'm here with you." In her enclosure, Amara carefully arranged nesting materials around her new charge. Her movements were purposeful, confident, the depressed animal of 3 months ago replaced by a focused, nurturing presence. Some things once truly learned were never really forgotten. They just waited for the right moment to return. 6 months later, autumn painted Jefferson Park Zoo in golden hues as Dana approached the primate center. The juvenile gorilla, officially named Zola but called Little Zai by the keepers, had thrived under Amara's care. Helen and Milo were already waiting for their Saturday morning visit, a supplement to their regular Tuesday sessions that helped Zola acclimate to what Dr. Reeves called Amara's extended social network. "How was the conference?" Helen asked as Dana arranged her notes. Illuminating, Dr. Lindbergh actually cited our case study in her keynote. Not to criticize it, but as an example of how observational data can complement controlled studies. Their conversation paused as Amara appeared with Zola following close behind. The difference in the juvenile was remarkable. Her formerly thin frame had filled out, her movements now confident. She still stayed close to Amara, but it was the closeness of security rather than fear. When they reached the glass, Amara placed her palm against it across from Milo's smaller one. Zola studied him with bright, curious eyes before mimicking Amara's gesture. She's learning the greeting, Helen noted. Observational learning, Dana confirmed. She's watching Amara and adopting her behaviors. Milo began their tapping sequence. Amara responded immediately. And to everyone's delight, Zola attempted her own version, clumsy but recognizable. She's learning the code too, Milo laughed. Cultural transmission, Dana murmured, documenting the interaction. Milo showed them a framed photograph from the zoo's archives. James holding toddler, Milo with pregnant Amara on the other side of the glass. Amara studied the image intently before making the sign for family. I've been thinking about James's research notes, Helen told Dana. There might be valuable data there for your study. That could be invaluable, Dana said, containing her professional excitement. It would provide a baseline for comparing her behaviors then and now. I think he'd want them to be used, Helen decided, to help others understand what he was beginning to see, how profound these cross-species connections can be. 1 year later, Dana stood in a university auditorium, presenting the Amara study's findings. In the front row sat Helen and Milo, now 8 and wearing a junior researcher badge. Even Dr. Lindbergh attended, having become an unexpected ally in securing additional funding. Our journey into understanding gorilla memory began with an unexpected reunion. A young boy visiting a zoo, and a gorilla who recognized him after 5 years of separation. Dana began. Back at Jefferson Park Zoo, unaware of their pivotal role in changing scientific perspectives, Amara and Zola went about their day. Their Tuesday visitors still came without fail. The tapping still spoke volumes through the glass. The memories carried by both humans and gorillas continued to build upon each other, creating a shared language of presence that said, simply and profoundly, I'm here with you, I remember, I return. Some bonds were truly unbreakable, spanning years, transcending loss, bridging worlds that seemed separate but were perhaps more connected than anyone had realized. Not because gorillas thought like humans or humans like gorillas, but because beneath the differences lay something fundamental, the capacity to recognize another being, to remember them, and to find meaning in that remembering. A memory kept safe and carried forward, transforming grief into a new kind of joy.